When we talk about this industry, it's normalized to have like the long hours, the stress, the time commitments, the constant pressure that you're under, like working under the line and things. But and then we lose ourselves in that process.
Poached sat down with Zia Sheikh and Taylor Bauer of Restaurant After Hours to discuss mental health awareness in the restaurant industry and how managers can support themselves and their teams. Restaurant After Hours is a registered 501c3 charitable organization providing mental health advocacy, resources, and support for the industry. So let's get into it. To start, would you want to take turns kind of introducing yourself and your role at Restaurant After Hours, and then maybe give us a little background about Restaurant After Hours and your mission?
Sure. Hi, my name is Zia Sheikh, and I'm the founder of Restaurant After Hours, which was founded in December of 2018 in Brooklyn, New York. We're an organization that provides mental health support for the hospitality industry.
And my name is Taylor Bauer. I'm the marketing manager for Restaurant After Hours, so I help on the back end kind of putting out our social media material and trying to spread our reach.
So why did you start Restaurant After Hours? Like, what was the point that you decided that this was an organization that needed to be out there? And how did it start versus how is it today, as far as your goals?
Sure. So I'm a 20-year veteran of the hospitality industry working as a chef. Between the years of 2016, 2018, I was going through a lot of mental health struggles. Essentially, a history of trauma, alcohol abuse, depression, anxiety. It all just kind of came together and essentially just like hit me between those 2 years. And so through a 2 year period, I was it's like like trying to just get back into the headspace. It was just like I just turned into a very stressed out, angry human being. I've turned into a very toxic manager. I stopped trusting staff. I was snapping at staff. I was just pushing myself too hard. I had no work-life balance. I had gained 60 pounds in those 2 years. It was just one thing after the other where like my health and both my health, my physical health and my mental health were just like deteriorating. And so in 2018, I was working as a chef at a very prominent restaurant here in New York. I was actually fired from the position. And when that did happen, it was almost like a blessing in disguise. I wasn't upset about it whatsoever. I decided, hey, you know what? This is finally an opportunity for me to take care of myself and do what I need to do to get myself back on track. So I ended up taking 6 months off from the industry. I had two goals in mind at that time. I wanted to start therapy and I wanted to become sober. And over the course of the next 6 months, now being in a position where I had no insurance, no money coming in, I didn't know where to start. So I started doing the research. I started pulling together all these different resources that were available to people like myself that I could use. I ended up achieving those two goals. I started therapy in October of 2018. I became sober in December of 2018. And when I had all that information in front of me, I realized, hey, you know what? There's lots of people in this position that could use this information. So I decided to start the organization from there. So a couple weeks later, we put in the paperwork, and December 28th, 2018, Restaurant After Hours was born.
So you were kind of just inspired by your own need, like you were going through everything and you realized there wasn't like this resource for you, and so you decided to step in and be that resource for other people.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
And so you kind of touched on like you were working in the industry and it took you to this boiling point.
Yes.
What is it about restaurant work that kind of contributes to like a lack of mental and physical health awareness? Is it the restaurant work in itself, or is it something else? Are there like outside forces?
It's mainly the restaurant work in itself and the goals that we have in mind while working in this industry. Like we bend over backwards for our guests, and sometimes that takes too much of the forefront where we forget about ourselves in the process. So, people, when we talk about this industry, it's normalized to have like the long hours, the stress, the time commitments, the constant pressure that you're under, like working under the line and things. But and then we lose ourselves in that process. So we just need to just take a step back and just be like, hey, you know what, we need to sustain ourselves just as much as we're helping out our guests right now. And so it's a really hard balance to find. about taking care of somebody else's needs while also taking care of our needs in the process.
And so, what kind of resources do you offer people who seek or come to restaurant after hours and seek guidance?
So, right from our website, we offer a resource page that has 200 resources on it. Now, this could be just informational. This could be helping people find a therapist. This could be crisis hotlines. There's a variety of things that are there for people to use, and our website is completely free. There's no membership dues or anything like that. And then if you need help navigating it, you can send us an email. Either myself or somebody else from the team will respond to you, listen to your story, see what you need, and then assist you in getting that help that you need.
That's moving kind of to the next question about, how would you like to see the industry move forward? We talked a little bit about, there's just this kind of nature in the restaurant industry to always be caring for others and not a focus on caring for yourself. Are there any trends you're seeing or ways that you hope that the industry kind of moves forward?
It's just more so finding the balance of between those two of like taking care of the guests as well as taking care of ourselves. The conversation is really just like, we have to bend over backwards for our guests, but we need to put ourselves in that conversation as well. When the pandemic started, it kind of tipped the other way where there was a lot more conversation about, hey, how can we take care of ourselves right now? But then now it's kind of leaning towards back to where it was originally. And so like, we kind of have to think about how do we now get in the middle of that? How can we focus on our guests as well as take care of ourselves? And then that way we can create kind of more of a sustainable future for everybody.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's like it's hard because I mean I worked in the industry, so I get that aspect of like, giving so much back and the long hours. And it's when you do work in the industry, it's not just long hours, you're also socially exhausted by the end of it, you're physically exhausted by the end of it. And so it's just pulling on all these strings, I guess. And um, yeah, it's just interesting how coming out of the pandemic, there was this focus on how can we like refocus ourselves, and that I feel like in our industry and in a lot of ways, like you hear in dating, like how can you love someone if you don't love yourself? Like how can you give the best experience to your guests if you're not taking care of yourself? So it's in everybody's best interest to be a little bit more self-aware and take that time for yourself and recognizing when you need to kind of step back and take that time for yourself.
And it's hard too because like, there's still this conversation about we put so much pressure on ourselves to just kind of keep moving forward and we wear them like badges of honor. And it's just like the more hours that you work, the more you congratulate yourself and just like, like, hey, I worked 16 hours today. That's great. Like let's just keep that going. And it's just like, well, if you're not taking breaks for yourself, like, can I really congratulate you? Like, is that worth congratulating? Like, no, that actually makes me feel bad for you. Like, you need to at least, take some time for yourself, like during the day of like, you know, what else do you enjoy? Like, what can you do outside of this atmosphere? So,
I think it's a big part of the culture and like part of what makes, especially at least in fine dining, like what makes the industry like so sexy to people is that like it's this really super like high stress, high stakes atmosphere. So when you're able to function in it, you feel like this sense of like I can handle all of this stuff. Like, look at all of this stuff that I'm enduring. And that, like, that's kind of like what Zia was saying. Like, that's your badge of honor is like, look at how much I've put myself through, all of like the blood, sweat, and the tears that's making me this great chef or this great server. Or like, and I'm seeing it reflected in tips or, in like getting better. And like, maybe you're getting critiqued less on like the food that you're putting out. And it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. And it just like goes and goes and goes. So I think it's like, a cultural thing that we need to talk about, which is why our organization is so great because a huge part of what we do is starting these conversations or jumping into a restaurant that needs help on a specific issue and like facilitating that conversation. Because given the range of the industry, there's not like a one size fits all solution to this. Like we can't ask little mom and pop restaurants to do a 20% automatic gratuity and we can't, it's so different across the board. So I think just starting with something simple like having a conversation and pointing people towards free resources is like an excellent place to start.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too. Like I think with that mentality that you were talking about, it also kind of creates this like chain reaction. Like if this one person is working 115% and this other person's working 90% or 80%, are they slacking? Are they like there's this pressure to keep up, and so then everybody's kind of like trying to keep up or compete. And it seems like, I don't know, I don't feel like we talk enough about how, sometimes it takes a leader to kind of set the standard, and is that management's role, and how can management help support that kind of these changes that we're talking about, like this work-life balance, and does your organization help employers that are interested in being a better leader and provide back to their workforce, and how do you do that?
I mean, like, regardless of whatever your position is, like, people are people, and you need to, they need to be taken care of. So leaders, especially, they have the responsibility of having their staffs underneath them. So yes, they do need to set a precedent. Yes, they do need to set an example. Yes, they also need to, take care of like the people that are working under them because they're only as good as those people. So if you have people that are just like not not fully mentally there, right? That's a reflection on like the entire team. And so like leaders do have that responsibility of just making sure that everybody's doing their jobs correctly, and like so, but they also need to take care of themselves in the process. So to help them, it's also just as important to have that conversation about like take care of yourself. Um, Point yourself in a direction of like taking maybe a mental health first aid course to give you the education that you need, um, to understand what depression is, anxiety is, substance abuse, how to look out for those signs of like maybe you have a team member that is struggling. A lot of employers that I talk to, like they just don't know how to. They don't have the education of or the experience of like how to deal with these issues. And so one thing that I do is like I try to tell them take this free course, mental health first aid. It's available virtually, in person, all across the U.S. It will give you an introduction to what um, what all these disorders and illnesses are, how to approach somebody, how to listen empathetically, how to resolve issues that are happening, and how to point people towards resources. And Restaurant After Hours is one of those resources that people can point them to. So yeah, it's equally as important. But like I also don't want to take away from somebody that could be working an hourly position where like you know just because you're a dishwasher does not mean that you don't need help. It doesn't mean that you're not important. Like you're a very important part of that team. And same thing with like a prep cook or a bartender or a server. It doesn't matter what your position is. The restaurant team is a team and it has to function as well. So
And you mentioned it kind of earlier, but like there's no like one size fits all. An independent restaurant might not be able to afford benefits to offer their employees, but are there ways that they can still help?
Yeah, I think the best way is just to start the conversation and kind of go against the grain, like we were talking about, that there's this cycle and the culture of a restaurant is like toxic kind of in and of itself. So choosing to go against the grain and like let your employees step back, take the time that they need, or like ask them how they're doing and like create space for mental health in your organization, no matter how small, I think is like one of the best ways that you can, be there for them. That's totally free. And it's just like changing the culture of your restaurant.
and then I just want to add on to that. Depending on the state, there are free resources that people can reach out to. At least here in New York, New York has its own crisis number that all New Yorkers can reach out to. There's also one nonprofit here in Brooklyn, another nonprofit in Brooklyn that provides free counseling to anybody that walks in the door. And so, one thing that we're currently working on behind the scenes right now is compiling these state-specific resources, which will hopefully be on our website, at some point next year. But we're hoping to find those free resources that are specific for each state that any restaurant that does not have health insurance can use.
Do you provide any kind of advice to management that's like noticing something in someone else and how to approach it? Or is there kind of like, should employers have like a package that kind of covers this stuff and leave it for their employees to access on their own, or should employers kind of take a more proactive approach in um, a staff member's mental and physical health.
I do think that it should be more proactive. It's hard for me to answer that because every workplace is different. So sometimes that's done through an HR company, and then other times it's not. So I can't really answer that to a degree of accuracy. It has to be. I have to look at that. We have to look at that specific workplace to see like what might work best for them. But what we can provide is, um, yes, there are ways to approach an employee about it, and that's usually um, just pulling them off to the side, just having a very honest conversation, asking if you're okay, asking what may be going on, and listening, and like not just pretending to listen, but actually listening to them and seeing where you can provide help and resources and support for that person.
I think it's a case by case basis, but yes. And sometimes restaurants experience something together, like the loss of a coworker or something, where then they want us to step in. We have two licensed therapists on our staff that, are very well equipped to handle situations like that and can kind of tailor the content that we already provide into like a package that they can disperse to their team in whatever medium works the best for them.
So your site, you have all these resources on your site, but you will also work individually with restaurants that kind of want more hands-on guidance.
We work with individuals, and we also work with workplaces. It depends on who reaches out to us, but like we're here for everybody. Anybody that reaches out. I shouldn't say everybody
Yeah.
because it's a big industry.
Yeah, for sure. And so we had kind of touched on this off the recording, but like when we decide to publish this, it'll probably be around the holidays. So, are there any tools or advice that you'd like to give to the industry, like as we approach this really stressful part of the year where there's lots of events and drinking and the holidays in general, whether you're in the industry or not, can be a really stressful time for people. Is there a way that you suggest approaching this or tools that you have on the site that people should, feel like if they need access to something that they can go to?
I guess I would just say get ahead of it would be like my biggest piece of advice for like supervisors and managers and like restaurant organizations. Like we all know that the holidays are kind of a really intense time for restaurants. So if you can like at any time that you can get most of your staff together, just like preface it that it's stressful and like have a plan of action for like if people are going to need to step away and just acknowledge that it's going to be tough. And then obviously we have all of the resources on our website and we have downloadables too that restaurants can print off and post. So we have a great one that's about coping. So in times of intense stress, how can you kind of like, get through it at work and not just outside of it? That would be like really good for the holidays. And other things that they can kind of like go through with the staff to prepare for it instead of reacting as it comes when we're already in the thick of it.
Yeah, I like that idea too of preferencing it now and being like, if you feel like you're overwhelmed, like just come talk to me or like create that open door so that people don't feel like they have to hide how they're feeling or they don't have to just work through it, that they can, have an opportunity to feel supported. And then another part of that is which you have touched on is like a big part of this is employers supporting their staff, but also themselves. Is there any advice you would give to an employer during this time of year, other than approaching it for approaching the subject to their staff so that their staff feels supported?
Like what employers can do for themselves is like the same thing that we would recommend that they recommend to their staff. Take breaks, communicate when you're feeling overwhelmed so that, if you're having an outburst or say something that's in like maybe not in the best taste, people can empathize with you and, the same advice that they give, they should take for themselves.
Yeah, and then just adding on to what Taylor just said, like just remember to take breaks when needed, because like that pressure does build up, and instead of getting it to a boiling point where like that steam valve just releases, take 5 minutes to yourself, step away, make sure you remember like, hey, there are people that are looking to me for leadership. and then just step back into the situation with a clearer head.
Yeah, and I like that, what you're saying is like, the same advice you would give to an employer to give to the staff, like to do that for themselves. Like if they know that going into the holidays, it's going to be a triggering, stressful time, maybe doing what helps them feel best. If people were interested in reaching out, what's the best way that they can do that?
They can reach out to us on any of our social media platforms on Instagram or Facebook. We also have contact emails on our website, depending on what they're looking for. And the best way to support is to follow us on social media, use us in conversation when you're talking to people who work in the industry, and help us get the word out.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and sharing a little bit about restaurant after hours and some tips and tools that people can use moving forward. It was, we're really excited to get this out there.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting us today.
Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.